A nation of sheeple, a nation of sheep produces a government of wolves. And that's one of the strengths of the white Anglo-Saxon races. We are the most determined not to be subjugated into a slavery by the papacy. It's in our blood. We can't help it. And we will die to the last man before we submit to this if we've been enlightened by the Spirit of God. That's part of the Anglo-Saxon Celtic race. And these Shemites here, they didn't have that resistance in them. And unfortunately, these Latins, these Spaniards had a more determined drive to subjugate them. And so this is what happened. And they killed millions of them. Millions of them. Another interesting area you may want to focus on is the Mexican Inquisition. I visited one of the Inquisition dungeons in Guanajuato. It was so weird to see one of these dungeons in person. You only see them in movies or see them on TV, but to actually be there makes it all too real. It was sick to see what they did to so-called heretics. It was deep underground with all the instruments of torture still intact. The spike seat, Virgin Maiden. Virgin Maiden, for some of you that don't know what that is, it was also called the Iron Maiden, or the Iron Virgin. And it was a casket that opened up, and there were spikes in it. And they pushed you in there, they made you stand in there, and then as that door closed, as the arms of the Iron Maiden closed around you, you were pierced by 100 shafts, 100 spikes going into you, into your eyes, into your ears, into your heart, into your lungs, slowly closing on you and torturing you. Isn't that nice? And Rome has never apologized for this. Never apologized for the Inquisition. If you think that the papacy was really an honest organization, you would say, oh, we're so sorry, and we're going to make monuments to the Inquisition, and we're going to take people through there with hopes that we will never do this again. Oh, no, they keep it quiet so that you don't know, so that they can do it to you again. That's right. The spike seat, Virgin Maiden, the rack, the dunking wheel, and many other evil machines were still there. In the center of one of the rooms was a deep pit where a fire burned incredibly hot. There they would lower a cauldron which held the quartered body parts of the dead. That means after they'd tortured you, they'd cut you up into parts and then lower you into this cauldron and burn all the flesh and bones so there's nothing left and nobody would ever remember you. This way you were never heard or seen again, burned to ashes, reduced to nothing. The stench must have been horrible, along with the screams of pain and agony. And to think Catholic priests carried out this is sick. To call themselves Christians is a joke. Without a doubt, they are the servants of the devil, and I know they want that power back. The power to instill fear in people and torture those who don't agree with them. That's what I got from that dungeon, an evil satanic power. I believe they hunger for the past when their open inquisition ruled. Of course. Of course they did. He adds a few more, but I will cut it off there. And so here's this gentleman, Marco, who went down to Mexico and he saw the inquisitional dungeons for himself. He saw the mine shafts where the priests and the Catholic Spaniards made the poor Indians, enslaved them, made them dig for silver underground. You know, I was out at the Comstock Lode in Virginia City, and we went down a shaft there, a level shaft, and it's kind of frightening. It's real low, maybe 3.5 feet high. You have to 4 feet high. You have to crouch down to get through it before you get to this open chamber. And to think men were digging in this and blasting and digging, and there in South America and in Mexico they didn't have any blasting. It was a pick and shovel. And the deeper you go into the mine, the hotter it gets. So, this is what they did to the native Shemites, the native Mexicans, the native Indians in Mexico. So I would encourage you, my Mexican compadres, that whenever you see a Roman Catholic priest, whenever you see a Roman Catholic church, you want to avoid it and him like the plague. You want to stay far away from it and them. And until they apologize for the Inquisition, until they apologize for destroying millions of your own people, until they apologize for their past, then you need to continue to stay away from them. And when you get in political power in Mexico, you need to do just like Benito Juarez did. Just as he did. Who was Benito Juarez? I read somewhat about him yesterday, and I will give you a summation of your greatest president, Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez was the president of Mexico from 1857 to 1872. Yes, he was a Freemason, but in those days, the lower-level Freemason, and there was a great Masonic schism in the 1800s, which God sent in His wonderful providence to divide certain of the Freemasons against the Vatican, and so that they were used for political liberty. Even though the Masonic Lodge is satanic, nonetheless there were some men in it that did good things. And Freemason Benito Juarez was one of them. Benito Pablo Juarez, born in 1806, poisoned in 1872. President of Mexico, 1857 to 1872. And here is my picture of him in quote in my book, Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends. This full-blooded native Zapotec Indian is Mexico's greatest patriot, Civil War commander, and finest statesman of integrity, ability, and undying determination in his quest to make his beloved country a nation among nations. Having studied for the priesthood as a young man, he became the most dreaded enemy of the Society of Jesus while hating the temporal power of the papal Caesar in Rome. So here's Benito Mussolini. He had prepared for the priesthood. Oftentimes, the greatest resistors of the Vatican are former priests or those who had prepared for the priesthood. We shall see the same thing in José Rizal, the national hero of the Philippines, who also was murdered by the Jesuits. Concerning Benito Juarez, he exiled the Archbishop of Mexico along with 5 bishops, confiscated all of the Pope's church property composing the finest lands of his nation, expelled the Spanish ambassador, banished every popish religious society from the Jesuits to the Sisters of Charity. And the Sisters of Charity really are the female Jesuits. And hated Prince Metternich's Holy Alliance that was started in 1815. He enforced the liberal, quote-unquote, Constitution of 1857, securing the Protestant rights of freedom of conscience and freedom of the press, utterly condemned by the Black Pope's bloody Council of Trent. Remember, in those days, liberal meant what we would consider today conservative. And conservative or orthodox back then meant tyrannical. So if you were called a liberal back in the 1850s, that means you did not want to be subject to the Pope or the Pope's temporal power. So in that sense, we are liberals. But we're not the socialist communist liberals of today like Barack, Bin Laden, Obama, and like Hillary, Jesuit coadjutor Clinton. We're not like those socialist communists, Fabian socialists. We are true liberals in the biblical sense. Concerning Benito Juarez, he sought to establish a middle class and repudiated the national debt. In 1867, he rightly executed Mexico's usurper and tyrant, Ferdinand Maximilian, of the Company's Popish House of Habsburg, sent by France's Napoleon III, further outraging the Jesuits. So remember, Napoleon was the creature of the Jesuits, and he sends Ferdinand Maximilian to subjugate Mexico. Sorry. Or pardon, Napoleon III. This is called Napoleon the Little, and it was not Napoleon the First of the Napoleonic Wars, but the Jesuits are controlling Napoleon III, and he sends Ferdinand Maximilian. And Benito Juarez executes him. Praise God. For boldly resisting the Pope's temporal power over Mexico, Benito Juarez became a rebel king, quote unquote, and therefore a, quote, tyrant, unquote, according to the satanic doctrines of the Spanish Jesuit Francisco Sarez. And when that happens, when a political leader is adjudged to be a tyrant or a rebel king, the doctrines of the Jesuits kick in, and therefore it is no murder to kill a rebel or a tyrant. Tyrant being a leader who refuses